Hello Canadian, I'm your mentor Bakar Bhatti, CEO of PAS. In this video, I'm going to explain to you that how you're going to fill up form T2091, and this is required when you're going to dispose of your principal residence. Before we proceed, here is a disclaimer that we reiterate in each of our videos. The purpose is only to educate Canadians. If you need any specific advice on tax or accounting matter, you can always call us at 289-952-3494, else you can send us an email at pascat2017@gmail.com. So here is a scheme of presentation. First of all, I'm going to explain to you the purpose of form T2091. Then of course we'll examine some of the key parts of the form and certain other important points. And finally, I'm going to explain to you how you're going to calculate capital gain on the disposal of principal residence through a worked example. Let's move forward. Here's the purpose of the form T2091. It's primarily designed for two purposes. First is to designate a property as a principal residence, but there is a caveat. The caveat is that it's for some but not all years. So it means if you are going to designate your property as principal residence for all the years you own it, you need to disclose it in Schedule 3. Otherwise, you have to use form T2091. And the second purpose is to calculate the capital gain for the year of disposal or deemed disposal. Now, here are some of the key parts of form T2091. Broadly speaking, this form is divided into three distinct parts. First is designation of property as principal residence. And then, of course, you have to provide certain information that is needed to calculate the capital gain. So long as the calculation part is concerned, it is subdivided into four components. In the first part, you have to do certain calculation in relation to a property that was owned by you after 1982, and we know that under the law, you can only have one principal residence after 1982. Part 2 is meant for those individuals who may have multiple properties, because before 1982, one could have multiple properties as principal residence. Part 3 is that you have to add up the calculations made in part 1 and part 2, and you have to report whichever is less. And part 4 is meant for the situation if you or your spouse filed form T664 or T664 seniors. Now, important points about this form. The first point that you need to keep in mind is that do not complete this form if the property is designated as your principal residence on Schedule 3. For all the years in which you owned it. This point I explained earlier also. Then once you have completed the form, you need to send a paper copy of this form to your tax center. You may be filing your return online, but still you have to send a paper copy. This is an important point that you need to keep in mind. Then your period of non-residence during ownership of the property may reduce or eliminate the availability of the principal residence exemption. So in this case, you need to contact CRA to determine the exemption limit available to you. And finally, for the purpose of this form, the acquisition date is the date you acquired the property, or December 31st, 1971, whichever is later. Now, in this segment, I am going to explain to you the information needed to calculate the capital gain. So, first information is about number of tax years for which the property is designated as principal residence. So, on line 1 of the form, you have to highlight the number of years when you want to declare this property as your principal residence before 1982, and in line 2 it is after 1981. Then you need to add up the two lines, and the total number of years designation will be given in line 3 of the form. On line 4, you have to highlight the number of years when you owned this property before 1982, either jointly with another person or individually. And on line 5, you have to provide the number of years when you owned this property after 1981. Again, you have to add up the two lines, that is figures given in line 4 and 5, and the total to be reported on line 6 of the form. Now, on line 7, you have to put the value of proceeds of disposition or deemed disposition. On line 8 of the form, you have to highlight expenses related to the disposition. Similarly, on line 8, it is the adjusted cost base at the time of disposition that has to be mentioned. On line 10, it is the adjusted cost base on December 31st, 1981. that has to be mentioned. And on line 11, it is the fair market value on December 31st, 1981 that you need to mention. Finally, on line 12, you have to highlight adjustments to the cost base made after 1981. For example, there is a possibility that you acquired a property and later on you incurred certain capital expenditure on that property. So you need to mention that capital expenditure on line 12. Now, I'm going to explain the calculation through a worked example in this segment. We move forward. So here is the basic information. We'll assume that regarding this particular property, it was declared as principal residence between 1971 and 1982 for 7 years, and after 1981 for 35 years. The total number of years would be 42 years when it was declared as principal residence. And then regarding ownership, it is assumed that it was owned by the individual between 1971 and 1982 for 9 years, and after 1981 for 35 years. So again, the sum total is 44 years, that is mentioned in line 6. Now, proceeds of disposition in year 2016 are assumed to be 500,000, that are mentioned in line 7. Expenses related to disposition are assumed to be $15,000, that are mentioned on line 8. And adjusted cost based on disposition in year 2016 is assumed to be 200,000, that is mentioned on line 9. Similarly, adjusted cost based on December 31st, 1981 is assumed to be $150,000, and it is mentioned on line 10. And the fair market value of December 31st, 1981 is mentioned on line 11, that is assumed to be $250,000. Finally, adjustments to cost based after 1981, that is the capital expenditure I mentioned earlier, is assumed to be 50,000. It is mentioned on line 12. Now, we move to part 1. It's regarding the calculation of capital gains that would be of interest to majority of the Canadians. And in this video, I'm going to explain only part 1. So, proceeds of disposition or deemed disposition, you have to mention on line 13, that is 500,000 value in this case. Adjusted cost based at the time of disposition, that is 200,000, is mentioned on line 14, and expenses related to disposition is mentioned on line 15, that is 15,000. The sum total is mentioned on line 16, that is 215,000, and then you take the difference between line 13 and line 16, and it is the capital gain before principal residence exemption. It is mentioned in on line 17, and the value is $285,000 in our case. Then we pick up this value from line 17 and put it in the inner column for calculating the exemption for principal residence. It is $285,000. So line 3, principal residence plus 1 year is granted by law. So we know that we declared this property as principal residence for 42 years, but 1 year is added, so it will be 43 years in this case, mentioned on line 19. Then multiply line 18 by line 19 and you get a value of 12.255 million. And then line 6 is for years owned. We know that it was owned for 44 years. You need to divide 12.255 by 44 and you get a value of $278,523, that is mentioned on line 22. Now you need to take the difference between the value mentioned on line 17, that is the capital gain before PR exemption, and of course the exemption limit, that is 278,523, and you get the net capital gain from part 1. It is 6477, that is mentioned on line 23. Remember one thing, if it were a negative value, you should have mentioned 0 over here. So this is how, within the context of this illustration, we'll assume that the individual will declare his or her capital gain as $6,477 for this disposal or deemed disposal in year 2016, and it has also to be mentioned in schedule 3 also. Now with this, today's session is over. I hope you enjoyed this video. For any accounting, tax or business management related services, you can always send us an email at pascat2017@gmail.com, or else you can call us at 289-952-3494. Or still, if you're interested, you may like to visit our website at www.pascat.com for more information. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed this video.